Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Marvelous Daniel Marcus. That's kind of like your wrestling name now, Marvelous Daniel Marcus. We're going to go with that from now on. Created Story Hour over 2 years ago, and we have just had so much fun connecting with our friends, connecting with new writers, and bringing more people into all these awesome stories that we've just been showing up pretty much every Wednesday. And we're glad that you're here with us again. Tonight, as always, we have two writers reading for some favorite nonprofits. Tonight, we have Tyler Hayes and Jennie Evenson. So if you are able to help others tonight, please consider a donation to our featured nonprofits, the Trevor Project and the National Network for Abortion Funds. Jennie Evenson is reading for the Trevor Project. LGBTQ young people are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, and suicide remains the second leading cause of death among all young people in the US. Through crisis services, peer support, research, public education, and advocacy, the Trevor Project aims to end suicide among lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people. It envisions a world where all LGBTQ young people see a bright future for themselves. You can learn more at thetrevorproject.org. Tyler Hayes is reading for the National Network for Abortion Funds. The National, that's an of, preposition trouble. The National Network of Abortion Funds envisions a world where every reproductive decision, including abortion, takes place in thriving communities that are safe, peaceful, and affordable. It envisions a world where all people have the power and resources to care for and affirm their bodies, identities, and health for themselves and their families in all areas of their lives. As we shift the conversation about abortion, it will become a real option, accessible without shame or judgment. You can learn more at abortionfunds.org. So everybody, if you're here on Zoom, feel free to leave your camera on. It's really nice to be able to watch people react to stories. And we have a nice little text chat off on the right of the Zoom if you'd like to chat. There's also one in Facebook, but we're not able to monitor it in real time. So feel free to leave us comments because we will follow up when we can, honest. Just don't be sad if it's not clear away. And our first reader tonight is Jennie Evenson. Jennie Evenson is an alum of Tin House Summer Workshop and has worked in or forthcoming in Ninth Letter, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Escape Pod, Flash Fiction Online, Everyday Fiction, and The Colored Lens. She lives in LA with her spouse, their kids, and a rescue Karen Terrier who looks like Toto. Jennie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so should I start reading now?
You know, if there's anything that we need to know about it, any content warnings, anything else crucial for getting into the story, go ahead with that and then launch on in.
There is the content warning. There is child death in this.
All right.
Leave that in there. Okay, the spice portrait. They said my love for my daughter was excessive, that I made her weak by kissing her and singing in her ear at night. They also said I killed her. My mother did not believe in tenderness. She was gaunt, all hair and teeth, her face hard as a stone lion. If she wants to be fed, she must work, my mother said. She hunched over a copper vat of bubbling bread bean stew, stirring to make sure it didn't burn. Powdered white liverwort dusted her eyelashes and the edges of her black headscarf. A dozen vats boiled behind her, each with a different gaunt woman stirring it. 3 young girls carried large bundles of firewood and loosed their loads into the flames beneath the vats. They couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, but their shoulders were already wide and knotted with muscles. I looked up from my own copper vessel and snuck a glance at Damla. She was sitting in the crook of a juniper tree collecting berries. She had dark eyes ringed in lashes that curled upward at the corners like a cat's, and a black ponytail that spiraled down her back. Damla was smaller than the other children, even the younger ones. She'd been premature at birth and struggled for every inch, but I was proud of her length of bone. By some miracle, she'd survived infancy. Many didn't. So I still had hope she'd catch up to the others. She's too young, I said. Nonsense, said my mother. You started when you were 5, like everyone else. My mother thought those born in the walled city were spoiled. They didn't know what it was like to wake at dawn, to see who had died in the night and steal the bread from their pockets. They didn't know what it meant to be strong. I pretended not to hear her over the clatter of the cooking compound. It was true, my mother never protected me as a child, but Damla was not like me. A protector appeared in the doorway with her wooden staff, ready to make her rounds outside. My mother waited until she passed, then hissed at me. Are you listening? Said my mother. Don't test their patience. The protectors assumed we were all thieves. They were right, at least about me. Armed with wooden staffs, the protectors lined the perimeter of the room. Colored carpets overlapped on the floor. They sat us at round tables, believing the only way to stop theft was to have us watch one another. My goal that day was to steal 2 stoneflower rolls. They were the size of my fist, made with high nutrition lichens and greased with gall fat. Damla sat at a children's table on the other side of the room. All the mothers cast quick glances at their children as they loaded and delivered baskets of food to the tables. The key for me was to wait until one of the children made a noise loud enough that all the mothers looked at the same time. Damla is going well, said Rabia. The lawgivers had decided not to award Rabia a husband due to her dangerous level of beauty. They said she'd tempt any man to ruin. Their verdict also meant she couldn't have a child, and her isolation had made her cruel. You must be so proud she's starting work soon. Rabia always knew where to stick the knife. I gave her a curt nod, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of knowing how worried I was. Rabia's best friend Azra smelled blood. I never hear Damla cry in your room, Naz. She must be very good at taking beatings. I can't remember how many beatings I took when I first started working, said Rabia. Felt like hundreds, said Azra. I'm just glad I had a mother who made sure I knew how to take a beating. She made me strong. But they knew I refused to beat Damla. Just the idea of being good at taking a beating made me feel ill. I set a basket down on the table and then went back to the kitchen for more. On my way back, I glanced up at Damla's table. She'd stopped eating to take a drink of cold tea. The tall girl next to her was reaching a meaty fist toward Damla's sheathbill egg, while Damla wasn't looking. I glanced around, trying to think of some way to get Damla's attention. A smile stretched across Rabia's face like a snake about to strike. Damla's getting so big, you'd almost think you'd been stealing extra food for her. My eyes flicked to Rabia, trying to assess if she was serious or just taunting me. There was a shout from the children's table. The large girl had given up on Damla's egg and stolen one from a different plate. Both girls screeched as they fought. The mother's eyes turned toward the table like a flock of starlings. The protectors moved in swiftly, striking the girls with the staffs. This was my chance. I grabbed a roll from the basket and stuffed it into my pocket. I reached up for a second when I felt a stinging slap on my arm. Why are you touching the food before we sit? Said my mother. The eyes turned to me. I dropped the roll in the basket. The women stared. They already think you're stealing. Don't give them more cause. Unlike you, I'm not afraid to beat my daughter, said my mother. The other women looked away. It was impolite to watch a mother discipline her daughter. I won't do it again, I said. Have you heard this, Rabia? Said my mother. I will beat her personally if I catch her stealing. Rabia knew better than to goad my mother. Of course, Amina, no one would ever doubt you. Rabia tilted her eyes at me with a smirk before she sat down at our table to eat. She thought she'd won, but no one had seen me take the first roll. I still had it in my pocket. I had won. Our work days were long, and those few hours in our room at night were the only time I was permitted to see Damla uncovered, so I always used my time wisely. My eyes touched every inch of her body. I knew the shape of her bones. I could tell if her skin was stretched too tight. When I hugged her, I picked her up off the ground to measure her weight. We got under the covers and she pressed herself to my body to get warm. I reached over to a small hole I'd carved in her mattress where I'd stashed the extra roll last night. Close your eyes, I said. Damla giggled, then squeezed them shut. But there was nothing in the hole. I felt around again. Damla's eyes opened. Her smile faded. She could sense I was upset. I had something for you, I said. Then my hand found something, a crust of the roll. I pulled it out to look at it. Bite marks scored the sides. Rats had gotten to it. Not all of them carried the blight, but many of them did. I could see the knob of her knees, her thigh bone wrapped with too little muscle. She wrapped her arms around my neck and tucked her head into my chin. Please don't be sad, Mama. I'm not hungry. I felt a tap on my shoulder. My mother stood above us in her nightclothes. I prayed she hadn't heard us talking about the stolen roll and that Damla wouldn't tell her. My mother reached out. I shrank back like she was about to hit me, but she opened her hand. In her palm were 2 sheathbill eggs. For Damla, she said. I froze, more out of surprise than anything. How had she managed to do it, and why? She'd never stolen before, as far as I knew. Never for me, that was for sure. Don't look at me like that, said my mother. The strong survive because we're willing to steal. There is a cry children make when they're hurt. All mothers know this cry. It is higher in pitch, urgent, fast, loud. It hollows. Damla could hardly lift the firewood bundles at the start of her first day of work. 5 hours in, her legs shook. At the afternoon prayer, Damla collapsed on her carpet and was unable to get back up. When the protector found her on the ground, I could feel the vibrations of Damla's screams in my bones. Every detail of her pain echoed inside of my body as if we were still one, as if the part of me that was connected to her somehow, as if no one would ever truly split us into 2. We still had 5 more hours to go before the end of the workday. It had only been a week since Damla started work, and she'd already lost weight. The skin on her body was stretched tighter, so tight I could see the dark spider webs of veins running down her arms and legs. I pulled off Damla's dress. She was tired and her eyes were closing. I picked her up, light as a sheathbill feather, and I set her down on the bed. I turned a wet cloth so I could wipe her face. When I turned back around, she was asleep. I tucked her under the blanket and dabbed the cloths across her hairline, crusted with sweat salt, then leaned down to kiss her. She was warm. I put my lips to her forehead again to check her temperature. A fever would be the death of her, but she had a fever. I held Damla in my arms, just like I had when she was born, naked body to naked body. It was early morning. I was on the bed with her. Her fever was gone. She was cool, almost cold, her eyes closed, her lips the colors of clovers. I'd made my hair a curtain around her so they wouldn't see she was already gone, so I could spend a few more minutes with her. You're falling behind, hissed my mother. We were standing at the long table, 30 women gathered around it, each with a stone knife. Young girls hauled baskets of red beans from the garden compound next door and dumped them into piles in front of each woman. Our job was to shuck the beans and chop the discarded pods for drying. But I couldn't move. I was holding the knife above a single bean. I'd cut my finger, blood tumbled down my knuckles, settling in the grooves of my skin. I could see the cut, but I couldn't feel it. I felt nothing at all. Please, Naz, said my mother. The tone of her voice was strange, soft somehow. I looked up at her, then noticed that everyone at the table had stopped working to watch me. Why have we stopped? Said Rabia. She stood across from me. She's doing it for the attention. Shut up, Rabia, said Azra. It's her own fault. That girl never would have died if she would have done what she was supposed to do as a mother. Shut up, said Azra. You don't even know what it's like to have a child. Rabia gaped at Azra, but the sympathy in the room had already shifted toward me. Everyone here has lost someone, said my mother. The woman next to me, Sarah, took a fistful of the beans, as I was supposed to chuck, and put them in her own pile. One after the other, the women leaned in and took fistfuls of my beans until I was left with just the one bean, and a handful of blood. I knew my actions carried the risk of death, and I didn't care. I missed her the most at night. For 5 years, we'd slept together in the same bed, and every night I'd stayed awake until she dropped off to sleep, studying her face. But that's what began to slip first, the memory of her face. I wouldn't have cared if I forgot my own name. I would have welcomed it if I could have remembered the exact shape of her face. Forgetting was like losing her all over again in slow motion, with only the weakness of my mind to blame. There was nothing I wanted more every second of the day than to remember her face. That's why I did it. I waited until my mother was asleep. I slipped out of my dress and turned it inside out. I pulled the thread from the seam. Using a stone knife, I sliced a strip from the fabric, then sewed my dress back together and put it on. I hid the cloth under my mattress. The next night, I took a strip from the other side of my dress, then 2 strips from the sleeves, until I had enough. The 5th night, I rolled up Damla's baby blanket and stuffed one end of it until it was rounded out like a head. I tied a strip under the head and made to make a neck. Then I sewed 2 legs and 2 arms and attached them. I hid the doll for a week while I caught my tears in a small cup. When the cup was full, I dipped my pinky into the tears and began to draw on the fabric with the liquid. The lines of my painting were dark with wetness at first, but as they dried, salt stains appeared. Yes, I could see it. First, her eyes, crinkled at the sides as if she were smiling. Then the uneven spacing of freckles that gathered in one stripe like the Milky Way across her nose, and the deep V at the top of her perfectly crescent lips, the mole of her left earlobe, the tiny white scar on her chin from where she fell out of the tree last year. My girl. I held her and kissed her. The memory of her face clear again, the smell of her still on her blanket, and I slept quietly for the first time in a moon cycle. If I hadn't slept so soundly, I would have heard the inspection whistles, but I didn't open my eyes until the protector was already in our hall. My mother shook my shoulder. Wake up, Naz. I closed my eyes and rolled away from her. Naz, she hissed, get up, the protector is coming. I bolted upright and frantically threw on my dress and pinned my headscarf, then stood at attention like we were supposed to. I glanced at my mother. She was standing over my bed, but frozen mid-motion, like she'd seen a monster. Then I remembered. The doll was in my bed. The protector wrapped her staff on the door. My mother grabbed the doll and stuffed it under the mattress just as the door swung open. We both scrambled to attention. The protector walked in. She glanced over our sink and our shelf, then bent down to check our beds. Nothing was out of place, nothing she could see anyway. She turned to go. My heart was still pounding, but I allowed myself to take a breath. Then the protector stopped and wheeled back around. Where is Damla's blanket, Naz? Said the protector. I fumbled. They wrapped Damla in it when they took her away. She slanted her eyes at me. I didn't notice it was missing when I checked your room last moon cycle. It was definitely gone, I said. You must not remember. The protector stepped back into the room. I remember everything, she said. She walked slowly toward my bed, her eyes roving every surface. My mother grimaced at me, her face contorted with apprehension. A protector had never stayed in our room for more than a few moments before. There'd never been cause. A group of women began gathering in the hallway outside to watch us. The protector halted when she came to my bed. She stared at it for a moment. There was a small lump, barely noticeable, on one side. She tilted her head, then reached down and lifted the mattress. She grabbed the doll, then turned it and held it by the neck in front of me. Hot flush crept up my neck. Is this yours? She said. I nodded. I couldn't let her think it was my mother's. The protector threw the doll onto the hallway floor so that all the women who had gathered there could see it. They could see my girl's face. Nas Isis, I charge you with blasphemy, said the protector. She raised her wooden staff and brought it down to my temple. Then blackness. Idolatry was the reason 6 continents turned to waste. We must not covet the material. This is what the lawgiver said. Grief is a form of idolatry. The flesh is just a shell. This is what the lawgiver said. I felt nothing but pain. Blue bruises flecked my back, belly, arms, and legs. The aches strung themselves together until they formed a weighted chain across my body. The lawgiver sentenced me to 7 days without food or sleep. I was to cook all day and night, nonstop, for the 93rd deliverance feast. If I died serving others, they said, then I would die a useful death. I stood next to a copper vat of steaming soup, stirring. A protector had been sent to watch me at all times. The sun was just coming up and the other women were filtering in, moving to their assigned stations. My mother took the vat next to mine, her eyes moving over my face. I could feel my eyes were puffy and red, though I didn't think I had been crying. Maybe I had. The women watched me, Azra and Sarah, Mariam, Yasmin, but they said nothing. My mother filled her vat with water, then lit the bundle of firewood underneath. As it began to heat, she mixed in purple sprouts, red root, and clover. She walked toward me. I thought she was coming to me, but she moved past me to the copper kettles where we stored our fats. I could feel the protector's eyes on me, but I needed to tell my mother something. As she walked back toward her vat, my hand shot out and clamped onto her arm. I can't remember Damla's face, I said. Don't speak, said my mother. But it was too late. The protector struck me with her staff, this time across my spine. Rabia knelt in the spice garden near the compound wall, pulling weeds. She watched everything, but said nothing. If I couldn't remember Damla's face, I wouldn't be able to find her in the next world. I needed an eternity with my girl. It was the 7th day without sleep or food. Somehow I'd survived, but my thoughts seemed thick and sticky. And every time someone spoke to me, it sounded like their words were wading through mud. I said only one thing to anyone who came near. I have to remember her face. The protectors climbed their towers and sang out their long call to prayer. The women lined up to wash at the prayer fountain. When it was my turn, my mother was behind me in the line. She leaned forward to help me wash. Sarah held me steady while my mother washed herself. Then they both helped me to the prayer rug. We bowed, we stood, we prostrated. We offered greetings to our angels on our right and our left, and then we cupped our hands to our ears to listen for guidance. It was an extended ceremony, a special one to show thanks for the 93rd deliverance. Azra helped me to my feet when it was over. I leaned on her as we made our way to the dining area. For the 93rd deliverance, they took away all the small tables we usually used and replaced them with a large table. It was round and set low to the ground. You must look, said my mother. She stood at my side. My eyes were foggy. I blinked and focused. The table was set with food, 100 different dishes, each fragrant with spice from the feast. There were 2 round plates of black bread, dark as eyes, ringed by strips of fried brown stem curled upward at the outer corners, a crescent string of clover soup bowls, pink as lips, with a deep V in the top, an assortment of stoneflower rolls shaped to a nose, with brown seeds sprinkled evenly, freckles gathered in one stripe like the Milky Way, a curved ear of candlenut treats, with a small bowl of brown berries as the mole on her left earlobe, and behind her ear a ringlet of hearty brown gull stew that trailed over her shoulder, a small plate of sheathbill eggs, on the right side of her chin, her little white scar. Only someone looking at it from this angle would see it. I stood perfectly still, trying to take in everything at once, to smell the spices of her image, to relish her colors, to devour her perfection. I longed to touch her, to put my hands on the bread of her skin. The women circled the table, their eyes on me, even Rabia. They said nothing, but they knew. I didn't eat much of the feast. My stomach wouldn't permit it, but I tasted a little bit of every dish so I could swallow her. She filled me, like we shared the same body again. When I got back to the room, my mother helped me into the bed. I took a crust of bread from my pocket and touched it to my lips. The bread still smelled of her spice. Yes, I could remember Jennie's face. I would find her in the next breath. The end.
That one broke my heart clean across. Thank you for making it a clean break, though. It is our habit to, in between the two readers, give ourselves a moment, a breath, to live in that story for another moment and make ourselves ready for something different. Because even when there is some kind of similarity, every story is so much its own world. Thank you, Jennie. And now we're going to move on to Tyler Hayes. Tyler Hayes is a science fiction and fantasy writer from Rhode Island and a social justice bard specializing in the College of Comfort. He writes stories he hopes will show people that not only are they not alone in this terrifying world, but we might just make things better. His fiction has appeared online in Another Realm, Nossa Morte, and The Edge of Propinquity, and in print in anthologies from Alliteration Inc., Pulse Publishing, and Aether Watch. Tyler's debut novel, The Imaginary Corpse, is out now from Angry Robot Books. Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again. It's really great to be here. All right. Speaking of similarities, this one also has a content warning for child death, as well as profanity and one homophobic slur fairly early in the story. It is called The One About Jacob. No shit, there I was, I say, even though they're the last words I want to say anymore. Story time, Jacob time. Tonight, it's the parking lot fight with the cavemanic duo, the third time Jacob supposedly saved me. It used to be a good story, but 3 years of variations have worn it smooth and bland. But I look over at Jacob, and for a second I see the half slug, half chainsaw mash of skin and shadow filling the space where he should be. And I blink, focus on his big, friendly face, and try to remember what made this feel right back in sophomore year. No shit, right? I was coming out of study hall after school, Mr. Merle again. And I'm coming out, and of course, Sayer and Scott have stayed late to smoke pot behind the gym. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And then Jacob rolls up in that cherry red convertible. Barron wasn't the worst town. It wasn't a place you got stabbed or where no one had jobs. It was even kind of pretty, perfect view of the ocean, never colder than hoodie weather. If you visited, you wouldn't understand why we hated it so much. The four of us ran the gamut of reasons for coming to Barron. For me, it was my dad's divorce. Same for Nina with one of her moms. Maddie's parents were still together, but Barron High was the only place on this coast hiring a computer science teacher. Bree's parents just wanted a fresh start after someone brought a gun to her old school. Broken homes, broken friendships, broken routines, broken heads. That was how Nina and I found each other. Our parents both thought the answer to our sullen pre-high school summer was therapy. Only one guy in town treated teenagers, and one day Nina was leaving right as I was coming in. It was enough to make sure we recognized each other at Barron High 2 months later. The lunch tables in the main quad were full of the normal kids, and the tables in the cafeteria belonged to the two actually scary cliques. In this corner, the dark nerds, the tennis ball bomb and gravity bong crowd, led by Scott Gilmore and Sayer Branstead. In this corner, the rednecks, camo and chew and casual rape jokes, led by Caleb Rollins and Liz Griffith. Nina and I took a couple good looks at the pecking order and went and had lunch behind the science building. Maddie walked by while I was jawing about Fringe, and within a day, he was bribing me into friendship with cookies. 2 days later, Bree saw Nina's Hawkeye hoodie, and when she came to ask about it, she never left. Lunch was bearable after that. We'd talk about our old homes, shake our heads at the alien customs of Barron, and reassure each other that the other kids were all dickheads. They say talking about misery lessens it. For us, shoved somewhere we didn't know and didn't want, it did the opposite. You don't get over sitting on an ice block by reminding each other how cold it is. That summer, Bree told us she loved us for the first time, and our clique officially went from inseparable to enabling. We started sophomore year with chips on our shoulders, and the kids who needled us reacted badly to us needling back. When Maddie came to lunch with 2 black eyes, we confirmed it was Sayer who did it. Of course, Sayer was over 6.5 feet tall, so all we did with that data was sit around and fume. That was when Bree said the fateful words. You know what would make this place a lot better? Maddie was the one to answer. If every interesting person here weren't taking their cues from 4 total douchebags. I chimed in next. What Barron needed was someone unifying. Nina agreed, but added that they needed to be an intellectual, someone who would encourage them to expand their minds. A natural leader, Bree said. Someone strong enough even the mega douches have to listen, added Maddie. Not just strong, I said. Kind. Maddie launched into a discussion of the martial art this mythical high school Jesus knew. He and Nina played off each other, adding other weird little things he dabbled in. By the end of lunch, Maddie was smiling again, and we all scattered to our classes and agreed we should do this again tomorrow. Jacob showed up in my math class the next day. The phrase all things to all people was never meant to be a benchmark, but Jacob managed it. He was tall but not enough to be intimidating, witty but not enough to make you feel stupid, and he had a smile that made you feel like everything would be all right. You could count on him for just enough partying to know he wasn't a stick in the mud, just enough hatred for authority to prove he wasn't a robot. Jacob was someone even the most venomous dark nerd or the most backwoods redneck would regard with a smile, but we were the ones he ate lunch with, and for that, we got envious glances in the halls. Maddie never got another black eye from Sayer. Sayer even apologized a couple weeks later in an awkward conversation Maddie never got sick of quoting. The rednecks left us alone too, no more muttered queers behind us in the halls. Everyone staked out their usual spots at lunch, but it was peaceful, and it seemed like we had Jacob to thank. That spring was the first time our crew was happy. We were just as cynical as before, but together it was something like bliss. About a month in, when we were sure there wasn't going to be any betrayal on Jacob's part, Nina brought the old question up again. So what do you think would make Barron better? That was when it got weird. It's getting dark. I check the batteries in my flashlight and I look over at Jacob. He's mostly Jacob again, but when he turns just so, you can see something snail-colored underneath his skin. Bree's voice is shot. It's been shot for a while. She does most of the talking on our nights together, sipping from that thermos of tea, well, a hot lemon water that once met a tea leaf, and telling more stories about Jacob, about the life he's going to build now that high school is over. I can't help but find it bitterly funny. Bree talking about Jacob's life when she hasn't built anything for herself except Jacob. Unfortunately, this kind of makes sense. Building her own life would involve forgiving herself. Bree was always a rule breaker. Her parents went from hands-off hippies to total law dogs after the incident at her old school, and her feelings about authority cracked under the strain. She wasn't blowing up RC cars and sniping squirrels like the Cavemanic duo, but you knew by the way the teachers looked at her that she was just on the edge of their notice. That March, Bree got her hands on a Revolting Cocks concert shirt, their name nice and big across the top. Principal Meyer called her in before first period even started and made her turn the shirt inside out. That same day, Caleb Rollins showed up wearing a shirt for Metallica's Metal Up Your Ass tour, and that one we never stopped seeing. When Nina asked her usual question, Bree was the one to answer. I wish Meyer would fucking wake up. We all nodded, some of us, Nina, more certain than others, Maddie. Jacob leaned in, listening intently. We tore into Principal Meyer all the ways we'd fix his regime. No more double standard dress code, no more paramilitary pep talks. Maybe, Maddie suggested, a comprehensive takedown of sexism in the school rules. Bree loved that one. The bell rang and we split up with the usual fist bumps and I love yous. Jacob was supposed to be in Spanish with me, but he headed the other way, walking with purpose toward the front of the school. I jogged to catch up to him. Where are you going? I'm going to go talk to Principal Meyer, he said. That was when I saw his eyes, not so much burning with purpose as incinerating the world with their fury. On Monday, we were all called to a special assembly. Principal Meyer gave an impassioned speech informing us he wanted to apologize to Bree personally. He further informed us that instead of banning lewd shirts, he would all ensure we were all better educated in the need for equality. Bree looked confused, Nina looked awestruck, and Maddie looked mystified. I looked at Jacob and saw the same fire. Whatever put it there, it wasn't done yet. I had a theory about what had happened, but talking about it was impossible. If we were together, Jacob was there too, and I didn't know how he'd react. So at first, we didn't talk about it. Instead, we just proved it. In April, Bree got a D on a history exam. She ground her teeth about it through to lunch and exploded once we got behind the science building. See, Mr. Merle had trouble reading her handwriting. His eyes were going, even worse than the Coke bottles on his face indicated, but he didn't admit that to anyone. It would have just been another in-joke, but as sophomore year wore on, it became apparent that how many times he scrawled illegible on your paper correlated directly to how much he liked you. And he didn't like Bree. So now here she was on the brink of having to drop band because of her grades. With her face buried in her knees, she shrieked about how much better education would be with Mr. Merle and his eyes retired. Mr. Merle left the following week, indefinite medical leave. At this point, my brain wouldn't stop spinning. In May, Maddie nearly got hit by a car, Trevor Achmonic tooling around in his restored Firebird. Maddie complained about it at lunch, and the next day, the buzz around school was all about Trevor's car. People said the engine looked like it had been torn apart by a wild animal. It was time to act. If bringing it to the group was a no-go, I had to divide and conquer. Nina was off campus for lunch that day, one of her not-quite-quit smoke breaks. The pressures of finals, she always said. She stubbed the cigarette out when I found her, rummaged through her bag for the Axe body spray she used to cover the smell. I watched her, curious eyes, sardonic lips, and thought about asking her out. I opted for saving the world instead. I think Jacob changed the principal's mind. Yeah, duh. She sprayed the Axe on her shirt. It smelled like incense burning in a distillery. No, I mean, I think he altered it, like way more than talking should just do. She gave me a dismissive look. If you didn't use $5 words, Nina figured you were pretty much just drooling on yourself. I licked my lips. Nina was the first person I connected with in Barron. If there was anyone I could say something ludicrous to, it was her. I think Jacob is magic. Of course, she laughed at me. Like he's magically convincing or something? Like the Purple Man? Sure, I said, biting back my tears until she realized I wasn't fucking with her. She gave me that dark look, the one that said she hated what you were making her consider. I mean, anything's possible. And he did show up right after we were talking about someone exactly like him, I added, making the connection at the same time. It was so obvious it hurt to think about, but I'd been trying to avoid it up to that point. The expression on Nina said she had too. For the next month, I got late night emails about tulpas and tulkus and egregores, a storm of Wikipedia articles and links to books that cost a year's allowance on Amazon. Next up was someone more difficult. I went for Bree after finals, no sense rubbing salt into already raw nerves. I sat down across from her in the library and dropped my Superman comic on the table for effect. She had her Dead Kennedy shirt on that day, the one with the Geiger penises. Man, I said, Jacob sure turned things around fast with Myers, huh? Bree looked up and went back to her book without a second thought. He's super charming, Bree said with a huge smile and layers of subtext. No, I mean, it's weird how fast he turned things around, isn't it? Not for Jacob, it isn't. A different approach then. You ever think Jacob might be too perfect? She looked up again. Too perfect? She asked with a fishhook in her voice. Yeah, like... The word egregore stuck in my throat, fighting to come out and embarrass me. Bree set the book aside, finger stuck in place of a bookmark. I love you, Brian. First name alert. She was not happy. I love that you worry about people so much, but you remember what Sayer used to do? I nodded, already knowing my answer was wrong. He was a bully. He was a murder waiting to happen. Him and Scott Gilmore both. They've probably got a pit full of dead animals somewhere. And now Scott's been threatened with expulsion and Sayers apologized, and the only people who stare at my ass get made fun of for it. She shook her head again, less denial, more trying to slough something off. I don't care how we got to this point. I just care we're here. But I mean, what if Jacob heard us say how horrible Sayer was, and then Principal Meyer, and now what if he overhears us saying something more serious? I think that was when Bree looked over my shoulder. What if we tell him we hate our parents? I said, oblivious. What if we say the whole town sucks? What if we say the whole world sucks? Hey, guys, said the last voice I wanted to hear. Jacob stood an arm's length behind me, hands in his pockets, looking at us with the usual placid expression. Half my brain was on spin cycle with what I'd been saying. The other half was worrying I'd given him instructions. Hey, Jacob, Bree said, brightish sunshine. Hey, I said. Jacob, listen, I'm sorry. Jacob looked right at me, and for that moment, he wasn't Jacob. He was shaped like Jacob, the tall frame, the broad shoulders, but what was folded into that Jacob space was gray and slimy and had a lot of extra contours I couldn't fully parse. The slimy thing turned to Bree and was once again the smiling boy we loved having lunch with. Want to go into town today? Jacob asked her. There was something wrong with his voice. Sure, Bree said, like that hadn't just happened. Maybe for her, it hadn't. The bell rang for class, and he walked off, silent as ever. That night, I scheduled a group chat on Skype without Jacob. Bree keeps going yarn after yarn until her voice box makes her quit. In between each one, she gives me the look of rusty desperation she's been giving me since that night on my lawn. Bree will always be Bree, and you can hear it in the stories she tells. Loving in her way, caring in her way, her obsessive, monotonous, slightly poisonous way. Lately, she started making up other people, other barren citizens who love what Jacob's doing with the place. I wonder if any of them are real now, too. I wonder what they are underneath the skin. Of course, they aren't going to show up. Jacob can't make changes that big with just the two of us. The Skype chat was everything it needed to be. Nina was on my side. Bree was set against me. The problem here was Maddie. Stop talking about him? The way he said it told me how steep this hill would be. Just for like a week, I said. Just stop suggesting things that would make Barron better. But that's our game, Bree said. There was desperation in her tone I would come to know way too well. A game we're winning, Nina said. She loved pithy statements. If you cut her, she'd bleed Oscar Wilde. Look, I'm not saying it's magic, I said, lying. I'm just saying, let's try not doing it for a week. This is bullshit, Bree replied. Maddie, tell them this is bullshit. That was my moment of victory. Maddie's face almost turned inside out, and Bree's eyes swelled as she realized what she'd said. If you wanted Maddie to do something, order him to do the exact opposite. If it's bullshit, he said, glaring into the camera, then there's no harm in trying it. Me, Nina, and Maddie's issues versus Bree. The rest of the conversation was just a formality. Most things stayed the way they were. The big difference was Jacob not coming to school. The first day's absence was nothing. The second day, we were a little worried. The third day, Sayer set off fireworks in Maddie's locker. Maddie got burns on his arms, Sayer called him gay for getting burned, and Scott Gilmore laughed. Sayer and Scott were put on immediate suspension, but Maddie still had to visit the school nurse. Sayer and Scott were free to wander the halls the next day. Bree got shit from Meyer about her dead Kennedy shirt, too. She gave me a look on her way out of the principal's office, and I, 16 and more hormones than bravery, looked away. Jacob didn't miss a fifth day. Scott wasn't in my history class, and I didn't see Sayer anywhere either. This time, it was Bree who avoided my eyes. Nina and I stuck to our guns. Jacob hung around us and didn't give me that look like he might be full of leeches. It lasted until the end of the school year, a tense little piece that had Bree reminding us with great force how much she loved us, but at least left reality to its own devices. And then June, and we were out of school, press ganged into summer jobs and yard work and endless hours of whatever we felt like, mostly complaining. Nina and I met up for lunch here and there. Maddie slept over once, but it was awkward, a lot of video games and what looked like companionable silence. Bree, I didn't see at all until the parade. After every 4th of July parade, the mayor of Barron gave a speech. It was about as exciting as unbuttered toast, but everyone still attended. That year, I was with Nina and her mom. We brought my copy of Flux, something to do while everyone else swelled with civic pride. We were halfway into our third round when Nina stood up and stared in the direction of the stage. I tuned into why a second later. And from here on out, said the mayor, his words blaring out over the red, white, and blue crowd, any child who treats another child this way will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The worst part wasn't the words. The worst part was the near riot applause. Our police department has already made its first anti-bullying arrests, the mayor announced, happy as a just-fed dog. I stopped listening. My brain demanded it. 3, Nina said, more than a suggestion. Alone? I asked. Her eyes widened to match mine. Maddie, we said in unison. Neither Bree nor Maddie answered their phone, and that told us exactly where they were. Barron's joke of a bus system was barely functional on holidays, so we had to hoof it the 3 miles across town to Barron High, giving us plenty of time to work ourselves in and out of a panic. The day was creeping towards sunset when we got to the high school, strata of orange and yellow and red playing out over the ocean. We walked up the cracked cement stairs to the main buildings, Nina in front. I hoped we wouldn't find them, but before we rounded the corner to our lunch spot, I could already hear voices. So no shit, Bree said. Jacob went right into the mayor's office and insisted that guns should be completely banned. Nina sidled up to the corner of the wall, gestured for me to do the same. Yeah, answered Maddie. He sounded distant, maybe even a little scared. Not just guns either, every weapon. No, fighting. He had a whole list of demands, Bree said, getting louder, the momentum of the story sweeping her off balance. No more persecuting anybody, Maddie said, his own conviction rising. And then Jacob said, sure. He sounded like the Jacob we all knew, the one absolutely certain his friends knew best, and he was going to do everything he could to make this story happen. Nina stepped around the corner already glaring. I swallowed as much terror as I could before I walked out behind her. Maddie looked contrite. Bree looked furious. Jacob just stared without understanding, happy to see us, but unsure of the looks on our faces. Nina, of course, broke the silence. Does telling stories make it easier for him? With just the 2 of you, I mean. I'm sorry, Maddie said, and was stopped by a raised hand from Bree. What are you doing here? She said, flat as a dirt road. Nina crossed her arms. We just came from the mayor's speech. He had some very Bree-like things to say. Bullies deserve to be punished. We said we weren't going to do this anymore. You said we weren't going to do this anymore, Bree replied, gesturing at Nina and me. I went along with it because I love you guys. Love. Bree kept throwing around that word. And it made Jacob sick, Bree said, looking back at him cross-legged on the ground. He came here because we asked him to. He wants to make Barron the best thing it can be. She said it fast, hopeful, heading off an argument she knew Nina would try to start. Nina didn't break stride. You can't just make the world be the way you want it to be, said someone who never had the power to change it. Nina winced but stood her ground. Everything sucks, Bree. I get it. You could hear the speech coming in her voice. But you are one person. I didn't need to add anything. I would just mess up the flow if I did. 2 people, she insisted, gesturing to Maddie. Yeah, because Maddie totally came along without coercion, Nina shot back. Jacob sat up taller. Sorry, Maddie, Nina said. Bree, Jacob doesn't know what he's doing. We can't just turn people good because we think we know what good is. Is this going to be some free will bullshit? Bree asked, because some people can't be trusted with free will. For a second, you could see it on Bree's face, the panic as she realized she'd said that last thought out loud. But she kept going with a snarl and a shouted, "What?" Jacob's eyes darkened around the edges. What? Bree said again. You know it's true, Nina. Barron sucks, Nina said. We all agree on that. But you don't make a desert into an oasis by pumping water into it. That just makes mud. Bree took a step backward, faced the color of a ready-to-rot strawberry. Jacob's eyes were completely black. I started to extend my pointer finger, and Maddie spoke up. She kind of has a point, Bree. Bree glared at him. Then, with a wordless shout and a spray of tears, she spun around and grabbed for Nina's throat. Maddie surged forward with a shouted, "No!" and grabbed her by the wrist. Jacob exploded toward Maddie. I screamed. The thing that defended Bree was still a little bit Jacob, but mostly it was shadows and teeth, bones and embers, a noise like someone dying inside a sleeping bag. It swooped onto Maddie and knocked him end over end like a plastic bag in a breeze. Maddie caught himself and looked right at it as it spread its new wings wide. Maddie screamed, then he cried, and then, as it shrouded him with its wings, he surrendered. They became a groaning, keening heap. I looked at Bree, watching it with an unhinged stare. I looked at Nina, backing away with wildfire in her eyes. The heap shuddered and stood back up into Jacob in one fluid motion. He turned and looked at me, that same dull, attentive expression. There was nothing on the ground but asphalt. I heard Bree sob once before I ran. Nina disappeared the next week. Most people assumed she'd run away with Maddie. I spent all of August indoors. My therapist suggested I might be having seasonal depression, but no pill ever chased away that blank slate of asphalt behind Jacob. September hit and junior year. Principal Meyer was still posting school bulletins about equality. Sayer was still contrite. People decided Nina was pregnant, tagged Maddie as the father. The small town gossip made things feel normal until sixth period when I saw Bree and Jacob in my history class. Jacob was making his usual small talk with all his attentive fans. Bree just looked empty. I faced front and shuffled straight from my desk to my car to the one-lane road home, glancing in the rear view every few seconds in case a demon decided to land on my trunk. There was a call from Bree when I got home. There was another during dinner, to my mom's consternation. I ignored both. So in a way, it was my fault Bree showed up at midnight to throw rocks at my window. She waited statue still on my lawn, face streaked with tears. I slipped downstairs, shivered my way out to her, scanning the bushes for shadows. Maddie was the first word out of her mouth, and then her head hit my chest and she started sobbing in the quietest shriek she could manage. I rubbed her back, shushed her a little. She looked up at me, eyes bloodshot, face pale. He was just trying to protect me. I hated the way she said that, like she was begging the vet not to put her dog down. Do you not see what he is? I asked, checking behind me just in case. He's what we make him into, Bree said. If we're precise, she said, just on the edge of begging. If we're exact about what we want, he's good. Baron is good. Bree had already made whatever decision she was going to make. I was just here to have it poured onto my brain. I took a deep breath and waited for her to talk. We don't need to make any more changes, she pleaded, but we have to at least make sure that, she looked over her shoulder as paranoid as I was, that Jacob stays Jacob. She stepped toward me, hand out, desperate for reassurance. I thought about the way Jacob looked at me in the library. I thought about the way he looked when Maddie grabbed Bree. And with that little difference in mind, I took Bree's hand and I forced myself to smile. Okay, I said, and immediately felt the worst I had ever felt. And then December and January and an awkward attempt at prom, final exams, graduation night, happy tears, sad ones, and Jacob, and us, still at the science building, 2.5 people, the 2 full ones staring at the half one, telling stories to make sure he still looks human. I'm headed to Reed in the fall. Bree isn't headed anywhere. She's landed a job at the bar and grill that replaced the smokestack. She says it'll cover rent on her room. She says it's best this way. She says both a little too much, just like, I love you. I finished the story of the bloodless coup Jacob pulled off behind the gym, and Bree starts croaking away at her next story. So no shit, there I was. I don't hear where she goes from there. I'm wondering if my story gave Jacob a house, if he'll be resentful if we take the house away, if that resentment will hit us or Baron or both. I think about 3 years of Sayer apologizing instead of blowing things up, Mr. Merle not hiding behind handwriting to play politician, Principal Meyer not being him, basically. I think about Jacob walking quiet barren streets, everybody in town smiling big, old-timey smiles as he passes. Life like a sitcom, always comfortable, always pleasant, always dictated by someone who wants to tell a story. Bree looks at me, her eyes begging. It's your turn, she rasps. Jacob's eyes barely look like eyes as he watches me. Jacob, I say, I have to go to college. He cocks his head like a studious insect. Brian, Bree squeaks. Jacob's hands flash gray, but they're back to brown in an instant. He smiles at me, placid and attentive from head to toe. Jacob, do you remember that summer where everyone turned on you? Jacob's brow furrows. Bree shakes her head, flails her hands, every gesture she can make to stop me doing this. You don't remember? I say. No shit, that was a rough summer. The story isn't perfect. I switch between reasons for Nina and I not believing in him, and I stumble over every third sentence. But the core comes out loud and clear. The way we all stopped believing in his ability to help us. And the brave, heroic way Bree kept on telling her stories and figured out through her mythic levels of willpower how to keep Jacob happy all by herself. Bree is sobbing when I finish. Jacob, I say, with lungs begging me to quit. I do have to go, but I'll be back every summer. The words sting. And Bree can help you in the meantime, just like before, right? Of course, he says. Bree is more than enough help. I sigh. The weight's not off my back, but at least it's shifted. I'm going to miss you both, I say as I get up and walk back to my car. I walk out to the parking lot with the most stilted pace ever, afraid to go too fast or too slow. I slide into the driver's seat, keys in the ignition, and I turn on the headlights, and I see Jacob and Bree. Bree is looking my way, eyes wet, simultaneously angry and grateful. Jacob is looking at Bree. When I look at his face, I almost can't make myself leave. But I wave, and I drive home at speed. I try to remember all the Wikipedia pages Nina linked me to, all the ways I might get us free over the next 4, 8, 20, or 30 summers. But mostly, I think about that look Jacob gave Bree, the look that says, I can be nothing but bones and wings if you need me to, or if you want me to, or if you can't stop me. The end.
That was a journey. Wow. Daniel, what stories we've had tonight.
Telling you.
And I don't think that the content warnings were the real thread between them.
No.
I think that the content warnings were about, I think that the real thread was about people trying to have a society that worked and trying to be themselves at the same time. And what a delicate balance that is. Oh, chilled. Well, we are here every week, and every week it is different. Next week, our readers are Lawrence Raphael Brothers and Randy Dawn. And I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com for any last minute changes, or to, look a few weeks ahead and plan your schedule for the ones that you really want to be there for the Zoom for. You can also learn about who's been here before and pop in on the Facebook page, on the Story Hour Facebook page. And there you will see 2 years and more of story hours before you. Many, many hours of stories to enjoy for many, many hours. Wow, I think I need to go hug somebody now. Jennie, Tyler, thank you so much for sharing these wonderful, powerful stories that have moved us all tonight. And thank you, Daniel Marcus, without whom we would have no hours of story to look back upon or to enjoy together. And all of you who are here now, all of you who come on later to just watch from the secrecy of your own devices, thank you for joining us and being part of Story Hour, helping us spin the thick and cream together. Good night.
Good night, everybody.